Good evening. I would like to call to order our May 5th Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting. We would like to welcome those that are in attendance as well as those that are watching at home or streaming online. We would also like to welcome Directors Hendricks, Richardson, Webb, Peck, Fortson, and Vice Mayor Wyrick, who are participating with us via video conferencing. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Director Hendricks. Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Webb.
Here.
Director Peck.
Here.
Director Hines.
Present.
Director Wright.
Here.
Director Compuris.
Present.
Director Fortson.
Here.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Wyrick.
Present.
Mayor Scott.
Present. Let me recognize Director Gene Fortson, who will give our invocation from his lovely home.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you join me in prayer? Our God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together, take care of the city's business. We are grateful for the fact we live in a free country and have the opportunity to make our own decisions about the future of our city and our country. We ask your guidance and make us mindful at this time of the severe suffering and pain caused by the pandemic and its effect on the entire world, and specifically with its effect on our city and our state. We ask protection for the first responders, including especially those who are in the medical field, who are exposed on the front lines on a daily, constant basis, and who are risking their lives to care for others. And we ask your guidance today as we make decisions affecting the future of our city. These things we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the
Flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a few proclamations to share and then presentations. And I will read from our Public Service Recognition Week proclamation as well as our Teacher Appreciation Week proclamation. Whereas many public servants, including military personnel, police officers, firefighters, border patrol officers, embassy employees, healthcare professionals, and others risk their lives each day in service to the people of the United States around the world, and whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, scientists, trained conductors, astronauts, nurses, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, social workers, and countless other occupations, day in and day out, they provide the diverse services by the American people of their government with efficiency and integrity. And without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. And whereas the city of Little Rock has over 2,000 full and part-time employees working in 14 departments and dozens of buildings who are focused on serving the 200,000 residents of Little Rock. And whereas in the addition to the city of Little Rock, other local public service employees work for the Arkansas Arts Center, Bill and Hillary Clinton National Airport, Central Arkansas Library System, Central Arkansas Water, Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, Little Rock Port, Little Rock School District, Little Rock Water Reclamation, Metropolitan Ambulance Authority, Metropolitan Housing Alliance, Museum of Discovery, and Rock Region Metro. Now, therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim May 3rd through 9th, 2020 as Public Service Recognition Week in the City of Little Rock and encourage all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of government employees at all levels, federal, state, county, and city. Thank you so much. Secondly, for our teachers, Whereas teachers open children's minds to the magic of ideas, knowledge, and dreams, and whereas teachers encounter students of widely differing backgrounds, and whereas our country's future depends upon providing quality education to all students, and whereas teachers spend countless hours preparing lessons, evaluating progress, counseling and coaching students, and performing community service, and whereas the Little Rock recognizes and supports its teachers in educating the children of this community, and whereas it is appropriate that teachers be recognized for this dedication and commitment to educating their students, and whereas teachers continue to influence us long after our school days are only memories, and whereas in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, teachers have faced additional responsibilities by having to create new methods of instruction and new ways to interact with and encourage students while also supporting parents as they teach at home. And whereas the National Parent-Teacher Association has designated the first full week in May each year to be set aside Teacher Appreciation Week. Now, therefore, I, Frank Scott Jr., Mayor of the City of Little Rock, Arkansas, do hereby proclaim May 4th through the 8th, 2020 as Teacher Appreciation Week in the City of Little Rock. Encourage all members of our community to join in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for their dedication and devotion to their work. Thank you so much. Let's give them all a round of applause. Madam Clerk, we have one modification for tonight's agenda to make improvements to the MacArthur Park that will coincide with the current Arkansas Arts Center project.
Motion to add the modification.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, but we have a question from Director Adcock.
Yes, Mayor, can you tell me where these funds are coming from? Is it a match or is this all general funds?
Mr. Moore, if you would.
Mayor and members of the board, it's coming from the Parks and Rec 3/8 capital improvement.
So it's all Little Rock funds, there's no match to it?
Correct.
Thank you.
Director Wright.
Mr. Moore, was this money planned for? Did we plan for this? Is this money that's going to take away from other?
No. As you know, we had money set aside for capital upgrades as part of that weren't specific to different projects. So this doesn't take away from any of the projects that we have already committed to.
Okay. I got some questions on that, so I think I'll get with you later, and maybe you can answer them for me. Thank you.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We'll now add M1. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda along with M1.
The consent agenda consists of a motion
Carry on.
The consent agenda consists of a motion to approve the minutes of the April 7th, 2020 Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Redstone Construction Group Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $92,933.70 for the Shannon Drive Street and Drainage Improvement Project and for the purposes funding for the 3/8 capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Redstone Construction Group Incorporated in amount not to exceed $220,937.40 for the Ward 3 sidewalk project and for the purposes funding from the 3/8 capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Barbara Pearson for the purchase of approximately a half an acre of land for use by the Little Rock Port Authority for economic prospect recruitment and for the purposes. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Virginia Ann Buttrey, the trustee of the Virginia Ann Buttrey Revocable Trust, Anthony J. DePietro and Louise DePietro, Thomas I. Kolke and K. Kolke, trustees of the Thomas I. Kolke and K. Kolke Trust, Jermaine K. Sherman, James T. Williams, and Annie Laurie Williams, heirs of Diane Williams, deceased, Mary McKinnon Biondo as trustees of the Mary McKinnon Biondo Revocable Trust, and the Watkins Company for the purchase of approximately 24.5 acres of land for use by the Little Rock Port Authority for economic prospect recruitment. A resolution authorized the mayor to enter into a contract with Rachel and Corey Clay for the purchase of approximately half acre of land for use by the Little Rock Port Authority for economic prospect recruitment and for the purposes. A resolution to approve a first amendment to the PepsiCo Incorporated pouring rights agreement and for the purposes. A resolution authorized the city manager to issue payment in the amount of $213,000 to the Arkansas Arts Center for improvements to MacArthur Park that are adjacent to the construction limits of the Arkansas Arts Center project and for the purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
Move for the adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Before we go to all in favor, we have a question from Director Richardson and then a question from Director Wright.
Yes, Mayor. On the MacArthur Park work, does it include the removal of the Confederate statue on the grounds there? I know we've had questions about the funding and funding sources, and this is either for you or Bruce. Does that include more Confederate statue?
Director Richardson, if you would, you came a bit unclear. Could you restate the question?
The MacArthur Park work, does it include the removal of the Confederate statue that's on the ground?
I can answer it. It does not, Director Richardson. I believe that is under a historic preservation easement, and the city doesn't have the authority to remove it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Director Wright?
Mine is not a question. I just wanted to be on record that I am voting not in favor of the pouring contract, period, and for no amendments to it.
Yes, ma'am.
So I need that registered.
That'll be registered. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
You need to say nay.
Nay on the pouring contract, but yes on the other items.
Those votes have been reflected. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read item 8 for the first time. Well, we don't have. Well, just before we go, this is the portion for citizens' communication. We do not, Madam Clerk has shared that we do not have any citizens' communication comments for this particular agenda item, this particular board meeting.
Mayor, the consent agenda with the modification passed, is that correct?
Yes. That being said, we'll now ask Madam Clerk, would you read item 8 for the first time? Or only, first time.
An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source contract with Ultra Electronics Forensic Technology in the amount of $294,268.39 for the purchase of a national integrated ballistic information network system for the Little Rock Police Department and for the purposes. First reading.
We suspend the rules and place on second reading.
Second.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Second reading.
An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source contract with Ultra Electronics Forensic Technology in the amount of $294,268.39 for the purchase of a national integrated ballistic information network system for the Little Rock Police Department. Second reading.
We suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to declare it impractical and unfeasible to bid, to authorize the city manager to enter into a sole source contract with Ultra Electronics Forensic Technology in the amount of $294,268.39 for the purchase of a national integrated ballistic information network system for the Little Rock Police Department. Third and final reading.
We've now had 3 readings of this particular ordinance. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Thank you so much, board members. We've now completed our agenda. However, we'll move forward with our update. We committed to this board that we will, as we receive as much information as possible in regards to the financial impact of COVID-19 to the city of Little Rock, we would update you. We're going to ask Director Sarah Linehan, our CFO, to approach to give us an update. As she approaches, I do want to give a few preliminary things to kind of get her warmed up and ready to share this. First, just want to take time to acknowledge her She's been spending a lot of waking nights working on our financials, and it's one of those things, it's always a challenge to forecast the unpredictable and the unknown, but also give us as much information as possible as we try to forecast and navigate through these uncharted waters from a financial perspective. Secondly, from a sales tax perspective, much of the information we will most likely not know until the end of June. The real impact of COVID-19. We do know we've been sharing our monthly updates. We did have a good March. We expect as April literally just was completed, we're still working through that. We'll probably see some contraction in April, but also when we see some of the things, we'll see some upticks in some areas that we generally do not see upticks, like grocery, even more of the increase that we've been seeing from internet sales tax. And so she'll speak to a little of that, but we also have a number of different financial obligations to ensure that we're always monitoring to make certain that we are doing what we need to do from a fiscal stewardship standpoint. I think we all know that this board helped pass a number of different budget adjustments on April the 5th, I believe, or 7th, April the 7th, to conserve about $5 million. And so we apply this board to, as we navigated through that challenge, which it was a challenge to do that. And but it's something that's going to help us for a future budget hole that we will have to fill from that standpoint. And we expect other budget holes as we have a greater understanding from a sales tax perspective. And so I'm going to make a couple more final comments as she's warming up. We are putting everything on the table to ensure that this city remains balanced in the wake of COVID-19. One of the questions was, have we ever to avoid furloughs and reduction in workforce and things of that nature? Have you looked at salary reductions? We've been working. That was a question from this board for us to look into it. I've asked our city attorney to look into that. So that's something that we are, that's one aspect. We're also looking at other aspects of cutting the budget in other areas. So there's a large range what we're going to do to maintain fiscal responsibility and stewardship throughout this process. And so it's a large gamut. We haven't made any decisions, but wanted to alert the board that everything is on the table to ensure fiscal stewardships and the impact of COVID-19. Director Linehan, are you ready now?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the board. I believe that you've all received a handout on the financial impact to date of COVID-19. As we look at the first page, this is just a recap of the amendment that you all adopted on April 7th. Again, as the mayor just said, that included reductions of $4.9 million to the budget in anticipation of some of the expenses and shortfalls that we anticipate. The next thing I'm going to go over with you is some of the bond rating inquiries that are associated with COVID-19. I briefly mentioned this when I presented the budget amendment to you last time. S&P on March 26th, S&P Global Ratings revised to negative the outlook on almost all long-term debt ratings that are in the transportation infrastructure industry. That included the City of Little Rock's 2003 capital improvement and refunding bonds for the downtown parking projects. Very shortly after that, we received a formal follow-up from S&P with a series of questions, very lengthy descriptive questions on the status of the system. We provided those responses to them on May 1st, and so they will review that and determine whether any rating adjustment is required. We do not know yet at this time what that will be. On the next slide, I will tell you that in the response, the city did confirm that we have sufficient cash and investments to and dedicated revenues for the parking system to meet the 2020 debt service obligations on the parking bonds. We do anticipate a significant reduction in daily parking revenues, But we have other dedicated revenues, the business licenses associated with taxis and that type of thing. We have the street cut revenues, which have increased significantly since the ordinance was passed last year that required timely completion of street improvements after our infrastructure is cut into. And we also, most of the parking spaces are under a monthly contract, and those contracts will continue. Some of the losses in the daily parking, LRCVB took steps early on to reduce the labor, maintenance, and security expenses associated with that will last through the duration of the pandemic. So that said, we do have sufficient funding for the $888,000 in bond payments that are due in 2020. On the next slide, we do anticipate a net reduction, though, of about $405,000. So where our coverage on the bonds would have been 2 times debt service, they're now going to be about 1.55 times debt service. That's still quite a bit above the minimum requirement, and so I believe that debt service coverage and the variety of our dedicated revenues should be sufficient to maintain the rating. Had they only been secured by parking revenues, that might have been a different story. On the next slide, we have another bond issue that is impacted by the COVID-19 significantly. And on April 3rd, S&P revised the outlook to negative from stable on all bonds secured by hospitality taxes, including hotel occupancy taxes and sales taxes on prepared foods and beverages. Due to COVID-19, that also impacts the city's 2018 hotel gross receipts tax bonds, which are the Arts Center bonds. Currently, it does not include the Robinson bonds, which are also secured by hotel tax revenues and beverage sales, but the coverage on that, encompassing both of those revenue sources, was much greater than the coverage on the Arts Center bonds, which is only secured by the 2 cents hotel tax. So shortly after that announcement, on the next slide, we received a call from the bond insurer, Build America Mutual. And on April 15th, Gretchen Hall, Nikki Parnell, and I met with Build America Mutual to discuss the city's obligation on the hotel tax bonds. As of the April 6th statement that we received, we had more than enough in the debt service reserve or in the debt service funded account to meet the $686,000 interest payment that's due on June 1st. Monthly transfers of revenue are made each month from the current hotel tax revenues, and as you're aware, with the travel restrictions that were put in place, there's been very little hotel activity in March and April. We forecasted the monthly revenues that we're anticipating for the remainder of the year, and we anticipate being short of the amount that we need for the December 1st principal and interest payment of $1,241,000. However, when the hotel tax was implemented, 1 penny of that is the park penny. 1 penny is an extra LRCVB penny. The city had begun receiving the proceeds of the park penny before the bonds were actually issued, and so before they were committed to the debt service. We had set aside the proceeds of that tax, and we have sufficient funds from the amount collected prior to the issuance of the bonds to make up the difference in the bond payment. So we do plan, and on the next slide, we plan on bringing forward a resolution to the board to ask you to dedicate those funds to the debt service so that we can demonstrate to S&P and to our bondholders that we are committed to making those payments on time and in full. And so you should expect to see that type of a resolution coming forward. And so then also on May 4th, I received an inquiry, so just yesterday, from S&P on these bonds. And so we're in the process now. We've already met with the insurer. We have most of our information together. And the response to the questions regarding the pledged revenues and the bond status is due to them on May 11th. So that's another one that's just under review. Our other bond issues, I think, are not at jeopardy. They're primarily secured by property tax, dedicated property tax revenues. As you know, those are assessed in one year and collected in the following year. They all have excellent coverage. We normally have bond calls because the revenues that have been received are significantly more than the payment that's upcoming. So I do not believe we're going to have any challenges with our street and drainage bonds and our library bonds, any of those that are secured by property tax revenues. The next topic that I'd like to cover are grants that we've received for COVID-19 related expenditures. First of all, the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance has allocated $786,845 to the City of Little Rock for coronavirus-related expenses. The city has to formally make the application. That is in progress right now. We're required to have a budgeted line items, on how those funds will be expended. They're utilized for overtime, equipment such as personal protective equipment, supplies, and other COVID-related expenses, primarily targeted to public safety. So our grants coordinator and Nathan Spicer with the emergency management team are submitting that budget. The next grant that I'd like to talk about is the Housing and Urban Development Grant. That one will be, or is $960,265 from the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act. Of this amount, $879,049 is for the CDBG program, and $81,216 is for the HOPWA, or the Housing for Persons with AIDS program. Also for only for COVID-related expenses for those programs. On the next slide, on Wednesday, April 29th, the mayor did announce 3 initiatives to assist Little Rock residents utilizing that CDBG allocation. This past weekend, there was a drive-through testing site in partnership with UAMS and the Consulate of Mexico in Little Rock. There is mask distribution at the Little Rock Kroger and at the Edwards Food Giant stores and homeless shelters targeted to disadvantaged citizens, but open to others as well. And then the mayor announced a $500,000 potentially zero interest loan program for small businesses. The city's been taking applications for those online. The next thing I wanted to make you aware of, with the federal stimulus that was implemented, there was no direct relief to municipalities with a population of less than 500,000. So no city in Arkansas qualified for direct relief. The relief that was provided to the states, and Arkansas received about $1.2 billion. However, at this time, we are not aware of whether the state plans to share that with any municipalities or not. But it too was targeted towards expenses associated with COVID-19. So the city's COVID-19 related expenditures will likely be reimbursed by one of the previously mentioned grants or by FEMA. All those expenses are being tracked. On the FEMA grant, we will have a match. On the other two, we will not. So we do expect our expenditures to be covered. Next, I'm going to talk about the revenue impacts. So the issue is that COVID-19 related revenue losses will likely have a much larger impact for the city's budget than the COVID related expenditures. At this point in time, there is no assistance for revenue loss. It is, as the mayor mentioned, it's too early to predict the impact of sales and use tax revenues with any accuracy. We will not receive our March results We've received January and February for the year, but we will not receive our March results until the end of May, and that will be the first look at the half-month impact. But that's also the time when most residents were stocking up with their groceries and their household goods and ordering things online in preparation. So I really don't anticipate much of an impact in March. And actually, the state provided a revenue update today in today's paper. And as you look through, their revenues overall were down 28%, but that was primarily related to income tax timing. When it got down to the sales tax section, the overall impact was a reduction of 2.8%. Now, the state does not have, they have reduced their grocery sales tax significantly. Municipalities still collect the full grocery sales tax. So, again, I'm optimistic that March will not see too big of a dip. Our impact on April, though, we will not be aware. That's our first full month of most people social distancing, staying at home, businesses closing, restaurants and hotels and that type of thing. We will not see those results until the end of June. On the next slide, these are some of the revenues that I can tell you about. These are primarily our charges for services, and these are for venues that we closed during the pandemic thus far, most of them beginning mid-March. So the results here are preliminary results through April 30th, which was last Thursday. So just as a reminder, the adopted revenue budget for the zoo was about $3.5 million. Through the end of April, we had received $332 in revenue, and that compares to almost $1.2 million at the same time a year ago. March and April are typically very, very big months for the zoo, with spring break and kids out of school in the nice weather. So already in the first 6 weeks, we've lost $852,928 in revenue associated with zoo charges for services. Our parks and recreation activities, these are community center, pavilion rentals, that type of thing. A lot of our facilities rent out space for events, and most of those, any of those events that were planned during the last month and a half have been issued refunds. So the annual budget for parks and recreation activities was $516,200 in revenues. We've received $73,360 compared to $135,752 the same period a year ago. So that's a decline of about $62,000. River market results are only reflected through March. We get those that information from LRCVB, and with April just closing on Thursday, we don't have the updated April information yet, but we're behind about $28,000 on the river market revenues. Our golf courses were closed. We're down $86,800 in golf revenues. And our fitness and aquatic center was closed. We're down $50,674 there. And then also our school resource officers, with the schools closed, we're not receiving the half reimbursement from the school district that we normally would. This, again, is only reflective of revenues through April. And so, we will not see that revenue the remainder of the year, but the effect through April is just about $45,000. On the next slide, another area that we had anticipated some impact is in business license and the mixed drink supplemental payments that we receive from our restaurants and bars. The business licenses are collected primarily, they're due annually at the first of the year. So most of that revenue for the year has been collected. We did not, when we have late fees, we will charge a late fee. We did not charge a late fee at the beginning of the COVID. We decided not to do that. We wanted to be friendly to our business owners. So we've seen a slight decline in revenues of about $40,000 in business licenses. Our mixed drink supplemental revenue bring in almost $3 million a year. Again, this is reflective really through the end of March. Those are received a month in arrears, and so we had collected $786,000 compared to $941,000 the same period a year ago, so a loss of $154,000. We'll receive our April results in May. And as you know, restaurants and bars were closed for the month of April. And while the curb service was available, mixed drinks were not included in that. And so we would expect this to not to receive any revenue in April associated with that source. And then on the next slide, we have our building and related permits, which collectively, these are down approximately $75,000 compared to the same period a year ago. We had actually forecast an increase of about 4%. But the good news is, while it has been a little bit reduced pace, there has been continued applications and continued activity. And so, we're hopeful that that will continue. So on the next slide, our golf and tennis centers will have a restricted opening beginning on May 9th. The mayor announced this yesterday. So both the Rebsamen Golf Course and the First Tee Golf Course will operate from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. each day. Tee times will be required in order to play, and they'll be scheduled 20 minutes apart for social distancing purposes. The Rebsamen Tennis Center will open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Friday through Sunday. So finally, as the magnitude of the COVID-19 impact on revenues will really vary dramatically depending on the success of the measured reopening plans that are underway and the avoidance of a resurgence of the virus. So as the economic impact and the duration become clearer, we'll be bringing forward further budget amendments. But I really don't want to try to forecast something too much in advance, knowing how unpredictable some of this will be. And I think we'll get a better idea of sales tax by June. So that concludes the update. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Any questions from board members? Any questions from board members? Seeing none. Any questions, just for general questions from board members?
Yes.
Director Wright.
Mr. Moore, have you given any thought to how we're going to get the neighborhood cleaned back up? I sent you my suggestion. Well, I not sent it, I told you.
Mayor, I know there was a meeting this afternoon. I don't know if you want.
Yes, so to answer that question, Director Wright, I met with both Directors Honeywell and Director Howard to discuss next steps as we proceed the state to reopen, that we'll be making some future decisions. We're having some meetings with our union employees tomorrow to provide the next plan of action, to get some feedback from them tomorrow. But we plan to implement a kind of a return to regular operations with social distancing protocols, moving away from the week on, week off. But we wanted to at least visit with the union, particularly within Public Works, just to kind of give them that heads up that these plans are going to be coming forward to go implement on Monday. But the plan is to really kind of return back to regular operations from a yard waste, code enforcement, solid waste standpoint versus what we've been doing the last 4 weeks due to social distancing.
And this is when now?
The plan is to return in a phased-in approach starting on Monday.
Phased-in approach. So in other words, we could be looking at all of these piles of debris and stuff for a few more weeks.
Based with Director Honeywell and I's conversation, once with this current plan, we project to be back on full schedule the 1st of June.
Okay.
We already are 3 weeks behind just as a related to making the decision to make social distancing rules implemented for the safety of our workers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other, Director Richardson.
Mayor, Sarah, thank you for the presentation. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, two quick questions. The school resource officers, I think we were $44,000 behind because of lack of match from the school district. Are we using those officers to do community policing?
He's asking, are those officers being used? Those officers are still being used for community policing, yes.
Yeah, great. My other question is your comment on union negotiation. I think about 4 or 5 months, and this is a perfect segue to another point I think I made about 4 or 5 months ago about you and Bruce and I meeting to discuss the inclusion of the BPOA and the black firefighters with our negotiation. And I think that we haven't, the three of us haven't developed a conceptual framework yet. I know because of COVID stuff is having an impact. I want to make sure that stays on the table, that we have the inclusion of BPOA and the black firefighter at the table with negotiations on behalf of police and firefighters. So I want to make sure you and Bruce know that's still on the table, and that I don't want us to wait to the point where Tom said we don't have an opportunity. Time prevents us from the inclusion of them.
We'll get together with the meeting with Tom, Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, let's call the meeting to adjourn.